everybody out in Progress Report land. That's Manchester, Auburn, and Hooksett, and on Computer Anywhere in the world. And on that front, we have news.
We do.
Talk about our technology upgrade.
The Progress Report is on Instagram. I don't know what that is, but we're on there. And also, we will be putting up a YouTube channel. And all of those are active. We don't have any content migrated over there, but those are going to be places where you can see all of the content in the show. We're going to try to preserve it. We looked around and realized we've got 13 years of work, and it's just all gone and not archived, so we're going to start archiving it.
Do I remember you telling me that your wonderful daughter helped us with this, and I hope to have her here. We can thank her. But, you know, we should use our Facebook page, which has been kind of in abeyance.
Yep.
But I did post the show not only on my own Facebook page, but also on the Progress Report.
She's going to
tell us about.
She's going to take care of that. They're all going to be cross-connected so that you know, the Instagram will lead us to the Facebook page, and we're going to be more active on it too. We're going to have the capability to start blogging, to start commenting in real time on important events in the news, and just kind of expanding the platform a little bit beyond what we do here every Wednesday. If we can sustain it. It's a challenge. We hope we're up for the challenge. We've also talked a little bit about expanding the team on the Progress Report. So, you know, spread the work among some really bright young progressives that you've seen on the show. They may look familiar to you if we can negotiate reasonable contracts with them to get them on board. But yeah, what we're trying to do is
we have to offer them the same high prices we're charging for our participation.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus a percentage of the gross.
Oh, okay.
So, folks, yeah, look for us. I don't have any of the details, but I am also very proud to say, many of you may not know, but my son worked with us as our floor director, engineer, for years and years and years.
Did.
And my daughter actually said to me that she kind of feels like she's kind of stepping into his shoes with us to kind of fill a role with us. So we have some behind-the-scenes teammates, and hopefully we can put out a product that you guys enjoy and that provides you the kind of entertainment and information that we've been trying to do for all these years.
There you go.
So, don't mean to step on the show, but it's good news.
And I want to get to, we have a wonderful guest today, Donna Soucy, state senator, longtime activist in many areas, including working for the Democrats in the state of New Hampshire, helping others besides herself get elected. But I think you wanted to lead off with one of our new features, the wonderful videos you select.
Well,
for
why
us.
not? We're going to be talking about local things. We're going to be talking about a very specific state Senate race today. But nothing happens in a vacuum. So why don't we do the Age and Wisdom video, just to kind of set the tone of what's at stake here.
Mr.
Age and
President,
Wisdom must be about.
you are the oldest president ever.
Pretty good shape, huh? I respect the fact that people would say, you know, you're old, but I think it relates to how much energy you have and whether or not the job you're doing is one consistent with what any person of any age would be able to do. We're at an inflection point in the history of this country. We're going to make decisions, and we're making decisions now, that are going to determine what we're going to look like the next 10 years from now. The impact on the psyche of the American people as a consequence of the pandemic is profound. Think of how that has changed everything. And we lost 1 million people, to COVID. We were left in a very difficult situation. It's been a very difficult time. We've not had a president like the last president who has made all of it so personal. I've had 6 Republican senators, I promised I'd never say their names, and I won't, come up to me in the last 2 years and say, Joe, I agree with you, but if I vote this way, they're gonna primary, I'm gonna lose an election. It didn't used to be that way. I've had tragedies. I've lost part of my soul, and I lost my son, Bo, and I lost my wife and my daughter in an accident. I think of all the people who've gone through what I've gone through and a lot more without what I had.
And you feel you have more to give.
A lot more to give. A lot more to give.
Oh, that was really nice.
And there we are. I mean, let's
nice.
not forget that we are just coming out of a real terrible time. And how do you want to look at it, I guess, is the point of that video. And I do think, Donna, knowing you as I do, you're on this side of how we want to look at this. How do we come back from this kind of a thing? And so that's the context. Let's swing it into New Hampshire.
And that will bring us right to Donna Soucy, one of my favorite office holders. And she has, how many terms, Donna?
5 terms in the Senate.
5 terms in the New Hampshire Senate. My goodness.
That's a big deal.
And one
That
of
is
those,
a big deal. You know,
and
people
one-
make fun of the New Hampshire legislature because it's so big.
Yeah.
But the Senate is a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah,
That's
Senate's
a really
not that
deal.
big. It's 24 senators against 400 representatives. So a senator represents, well, your district. How many registered voters?
About 59,000.
59,000. We're probably the reps and representing those parts of that district that they do, maybe 3,500, something like that. So that is quite something. And I remember visiting the California State House in Sacramento and going up there and saying they had 43 representatives. How many do they represent? Almost 1 million. Like 800,000.
Can
or
you really
something.
use that word represent when you get to that
you
kind
know,
of a
and-
number?
And that's their representatives. When here we represent 34, 33, 3,500. Donna, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to, I mean, I remember very fondly both your parents. They were wonderful people, real contributing people, so it's no surprise that you are too. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into being a candidate and an activist in New Hampshire, if you would.
Sure. Thanks, Bob and Mike. Great to see you, and I'm glad the progress report is making such progress. It's wonderful. Wonderful to be here. I was born and raised in Manchester, and as you said, Bob, both my parents were politically active and engaged in the community in a number of different organizations, and really were, I agree, wonderful people. I got my education at St. Anselm College, where I was a politics major. And while I was running, my mother was serving in the House. My mother was running for a 3rd term in the legislature, and she was diagnosed with cancer. And she died between primary and general election in 1990. And it was at that time that the ward committee had to name someone to fill her slot on the ballot. And that was when I started serving in the House. I was nominated by the ward committee, and I was fortunate enough to be elected. Served 3 terms in the House, 2 terms as an alderman, and then I left to go to law school and started my career. But I was always lured back to the State House in some way. And in 2006, after that election cycle, I became the Senate Chief of Staff and worked for the Senate for 4 years in that capacity. And then after the 2010 elections, decided to run myself for the state Senate in 2012. And I've had the privilege of serving ever since, and I am running for a 6th term because I still think there's a lot more good work we can do for the people of the state of New Hampshire, and certainly the people of District 18 in Manchester and Litchfield.
Well, very good. I mean, it's a lot of service there, and we're grateful for that because you made a real difference. What would you, if you could look at your long and distinguished legislative career, what are some of the things you're proudest of helping to accomplish, would you say?
Well, there are a few things. One of the things very early in my career that I was able to do was to establish the crime of domestic violence in the state of New Hampshire. For many years, when acts of domestic violence were committed, they weren't charged as such. They were charged as assault or charged as, a sexual assault or strangulation. There really wasn't a way to properly classify them as domestic abuse. And I sponsored a bill. It was following an incident here in Manchester where a young boy was killed by his own father at the YWCA.
I remember that.
Yeah,
horrible
his
incident.
name was Joshua, and the bill was called Joshua's Law,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
his mother was trying to help other people who had been who were in situations similar to hers. She didn't experience physical abuse, but it was threatened multiple times and really experienced a lot of psychological abuse while trying to parent her son. And as I said, his dad ultimately took his life. So what the law does, called Joshua's Law, is classify every crime that's committed not only by the act, but it also classifies the relationship of the individual. So if it's someone within your own home, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, it is a crime of domestic violence. And what that's allowed us to do is better target resources for victims, but also better charge perpetrators of these crimes, because we know that they are more likely, when committing crimes of domestic violence, to reoffend. And it's been an important tool for law enforcement. It's been a number of years now, but it's certainly something I'm very proud of. During this last 2 sessions ago, was able to work on legislation dealing with a couple of prescription issues. One was to make birth control available, a year's supply without a copay, which hadn't been the case before. It had to be staggered, and there are issues where people were traveling or had other complications and couldn't access birth control. And the other was capping the price of insulin. Long before the federal government did, we put a cap on what insulin could be charged at here in New Hampshire.
Whoever
and
thought
I was
that
involved
would
with that.
actually require legislation, that it would be so inflated by the pharmaceutical companies that you'd actually have to pass a law to cap the price of insulin, of all things.
And, you know, the fact
remarkable.
that we could do it at the state level is pretty stunning. And if you were part of that, it was a great achievement.
I wasn't even aware of that. I
I
learned
mean-
something on every progress report
Yeah.
show, so.
Well, we did, and I learned a lot in the process. There are people that, in order to manage diabetes, I mean, it's a maintenance issue. It's life or death. And in order to maintain their levels of insulin, many people have to use more than one form of insulin, which I was not aware of, but I spoke to many people. And those costs could be prohibitive for someone. And once again, you know, given the choices people have to make with a limited income, it was an important one to get through.
We have a call. We have Robert
Hello, Robert.
on the line. Robert, welcome to the Progress Report. Thanks for calling.
Hello.
Robert, turn your phone, your television down a little bit. You're getting a little feedback. It'll make it easier to converse.
Okay.
There you go.
Welcome. Go right ahead.
Hello, this is Robert. What's your guest's name?
Donna Soucy, Senate
Donna
Senator.
Soucy. Well, I'd just like to make a few comments about this coming election.
Okay.
You know, the Democratic Party is in charge right now in Washington. We have 4 representatives, 2 senators and 2 state reps, federal
Yep.
congressmen.
Yep.
Now, you know that this election is very important. And the only way we can win is if we get out the vote. In other words, there are more or less than there are of the Republicans. And we should try to get as many people on ballots as possible to keep our position in Washington, D.C. And I really don't think the Republicans have really good candidates. But like I said, we have to get out the vote. The voters are the ones that decide who's going to win and who's going to lose.
Right.
Those are my comments.
Appreciate it, Robert.
Well, those are fine comments, Robert. And I can't think of anybody better qualified to address your thoughts there than our guest, Donna Soucy.
Yeah, you've done a few GOTV projects in the past.
GOTV, it's all about the turnout. And
Yeah.
Robert
Get out
is
the
exactly
vote.
right. So what are we doing to make sure we get the turnout?
Well, I think the candidates definitely have very contrasting points of view, and making sure that voters are informed about that is critical. I think we do that in a number of ways. We do it through mail, we do it through social media. Instagram is one of them, Mike.
Really?
People
We'll have to learn
communicate
that.
well there.
We got to learn about that. Mike.
But I always think the most important thing to do is to actually have a conversation with voters. I myself, in past campaigns, have knocked on thousands of doors. I've started knocking on doors already and talking to a number of swing voters, voters that are undeclared, voters that really look at the individual candidates and split their ticket and their ballot. And once you get their issues identified and you can engage with them, I think it makes a real difference, and it definitely helps at the polls. Doing a lot of canvassing and direct contact with voters is key, and that's how I think we can be successful
You
in the
can
elections.
literally ask them for their vote face to face.
Absolutely, and if they have questions or concerns, you can discuss them, you can address them, you can get back to them if there are issues that you haven't been able to resolve at the door.
Robert brought up another component, though, of Get Out the Vote, and I think it relates, let me translate it a little bit, to voter enthusiasm. There was a long time over the past few years where the other party, I mean, they're on fire, you know what I mean? They've been fired up, the grievance-driven enthusiasm. We didn't see that so much on the Democratic side of the spectrum. And certainly in the middle, probably the exact opposite, because they're kind of not happy with either side the way they're behaving. How do you think voter enthusiasm is going to shake out as we move into the fall? Let's go specifically here in New Hampshire.
I think voters are very enthusiastic. I mean, you saw good
This
turnout
was kind of a softball for you.
for the primary, and I absolutely, as I'm talking to voters, they have a lot on their minds, and primarily, it's not just women, it's men as well that identify one of the most important issues is the civil rights of women being able to access health care and make personal decisions about their own bodies. And
I'm
I
glad
hear
you
it
brought up men
time
as well,
and time
because
again,
men are
because
dads, men are brothers, men are husbands. We're not as insulated from this issue as people might think.
absolutely not. As I said, men have brought it up to me in many cases. They are parents, they are spouses, they are concerned about this issue just as much, and they recognize that here in the state of New Hampshire, things have changed here as well. I mean, it's interesting, if you follow social media, people say, oh, nothing's changed here in New Hampshire. Well, it has changed here in New Hampshire. I mean, we had a very sloppy abortion ban inserted into
In
a
the budget,
budget,
in the budget.
which wholly inappropriate. It was done by Senator Jeb Bradley, who is someone who had previously voted pro-choice, but actually put this ban in, a ban with no exception for rape or incest, a ban with no exception for fatal fetal anomalies. And you're seeing the ramifications of that in some of the ads that are showing up, where women are talking about the choices they had to make. One woman in particular had twins. One of the twins was not viable. The other one was. But had she had to carry both, she would have lost both of those
And
children.
perhaps her own life, if I'm understanding
And
the
perhaps
commercial
her
correctly.
own life as well. And those are choices that are
Jeb Bradley is the guy to
extremely
make those
painful.
choices.
Well, you know, I don't know that the legislature is the place where the choices should be made. I think the choices should be made between an individual, their health care provider, their family, and their issues of conscience, their faith. Whatever dictates those choices, it should be left to that individual.
Absolutely. You know, I know you whenever an election is up and you're in it, and it's been for several years now, you really are a very strong campaigner. And I know your district has included several wards in Manchester and also Litchfield. if
Let's
I'm not
list the
mistaken.
wards so that the folks
So it's
can know.
wards 5 through 9 and the town of Litchfield.
And it's our misfortune that in the years that end in 10, 20, the bicentennial years when we have the census, unfortunately for us, the Republicans have been in control in those years, and then they've been able to control the redistricting that results from those census counts. And how did, I think the worst thing Governor Sununu did, other than the abortion thing you've been talking about, was to veto the bill that Margie Smith was so involved in, to have an independent electoral commission in New Hampshire. I think it was just unforgivable for him to do that, because that would have evened the playing field for both parties and put it beyond the crass political
Fortunately, the
power
court
moves.
did that, at least for the congressional districts.
In part. But how did your district end up, and what's your district now? And are you feeling pretty good about the district you're hoping to represent again?
So my district, fortunately for me, remained exactly the same.
Oh, no change.
But the other two Manchester districts changed significantly, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about District 16. So my district number is 18. Senator D'Alessandro represents District 20.
Yep.
He went from having the town of Goffstown in his district to instead picking up wards 12 and 2.
Yeah.
those wards were taken away from Senator Kevin Kavanaugh, District 16. So where Kavanaugh had 3 wards, D'Alessandro had 4, I had 5, you had 3 Manchester senators representing a good portion of Manchester. District 16, Kavanaugh's district, changed to 1 ward of Manchester, simply Ward 1, and it now extends from the town of Goffstown to the town of Raymond. And there was no reason for that. It really, there were other configurations that could have happened
with the population
to keep that more
Manchester
intact.
has, they've been playing games with the Senate in Manchester for years. They're just trying to wrest those 3 senators away from the city of Manchester, and we should have them almost automatically with our population. But that's a concerted
The point
effort.
is that this redistricting effort, which was entirely in the control of the Republicans because they controlled the State House, ended up with Kevin Kavanaugh, who's served that District 16 as it used to be, ably and well, is now not even running in that district. He's running to be in the Executive Council, and I wish him well there for sure. And it looked like we may not even have competition in that district, but there's certainly news there. Maybe you would like to talk about that.
Let's make news on the progress
Very
report.
big news in District
Well, actually,
16.
let's take the first news that we actually haven't reported on, and that's June Trisciani succeeding in her write-in effort and will be on the ballot in November. And tell us actually how well she really did.
Yeah, not only just succeeding in her effort, she needed to get 35 write-in votes. She got 20 times the number of votes she needed. She got so many people to write her name in on the ballot. And there was a Republican primary going on, Representative Barbara Griffin and Representative Michael Yakubovich. It turns out that Michael Yakubovich won the Republican primary,
Which was,
won
I
in
think,
each
a
one of the
huge
precincts.
surprise to a lot of people. I mean, Barbara was not only an attorney from Goffstown who had served, multiple terms in the House, and had led the redistricting effort, such as it was, and for her to
Set
be
that
upset,
district up for herself.
you would have thought, yeah.
Well, she wasn't able to prevail in the town of Goffstown. Michael
Even
Yakubovich
Goffstown.
did win in all of the precincts in that district. And just today it was announced, apparently Representative Yakubovich has withdrawn himself from the race because of some health issues, which I'm very sorry
We're
to
very
hear.
sorry about that, Representative. We wish you well.
And former Representative Keith Murphy, who used to be a House member from Bedford, has been appointed by the Republican Party to now run in District 16. So
What a
this
tangled
this has
web
really
this
been like a roller coaster ride, all of the changes
That's
that have
that's a
occurred.
very interesting way to get a candidate. You have had people have voted. They all voted for somebody. All who voted for somebody. Those votes were tallied, and now someone who got 0 votes is going to be the candidate. And that's how that's how they run. Okay, all right, okay. Who am I to judge, right?
That's the process.
I mean,
You know,
June Trisciani has to be considered formidable wherever she shows
Oh yeah,
up.
she knows
Absolutely.
how to
For
campaign.
somebody who
and
made
she
her
will
first
campaign.
outing a year ago running for alderman at large
topped the ticket.
topped the ticket.
citywide.
And then, when I spoke to her recently about the decision, she said, "Am I crazy to do this?" I said, "I don't think so,
Anyone
June.
else, maybe, not you.
I don't think
You can
so."
do it.
And now look what's happened. I would
Yeah.
not be surprised if she wins this seat, even though there was no Democratic Party candidate, until we had her succeed in her write-in effort overwhelmingly, as Donna's pointed
Now, don't go
out.
giving me
Yeah.
the equivalency argument. June had to go out and get the vote. She got some
She
votes.
did.
This guy got no votes. He got anointed with oil, and now he's the candidate.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, what a place we live in.
Well, it's going to
It's,
make for an interesting matchup, as we said. June did get a write-in the primary, so hadn't been campaigning over the summer. Keith Murphy was not on the ballot, as you said, Mike, and will be now for the general election. So it really makes for
he has
quite a
served maybe
matchup.
1 or 2 terms in the House, but not recently.
Correct. He served as a member from Bedford.
Yeah.
I think 2 or 3 I'm not certain of the number. At least 2.
With his wife at one time, I think. And all I remember about that is they promoted their own self-interest in the House about problems.
not
they
Keith
really
Murphy.
Did.
No,
Murphy.
no.
They did that. Yeah.
No, I'll never believe that.
You want to take a quick break?
Sure, it's
And
time.
you come back with your next video?
Fine, let's do it. See you in a few minutes, folks.
So here we are, and Mike, you have another.
Sure, let's do
one
another
of your
video.
Carefully curated videos to show us.
Let's do another video, and this is another one. This is in contrast. I think you'll see. Where do you want to be in the next couple of years?
Remember this guy's contract with America? How'd that go? In a few days, the MAGAs will try to sell you another contract for America. Everything they're promising is already happening with President Biden. An economy that works for all Americans? Check. Record job growth. Good paying jobs growing our economy. That's Biden, not MAGA. Peace through strength. Ask Ukraine who stands with them and who stands with Russia. Energy independence? Yeah, Biden's got that. Safe and secure communities? Check. Millions to improve policing, protecting our communities and civil rights. Fight to end government corruption and drain the swamp? Who are they kidding? For 7 years, they left us holding the bag and paying the bill for their reckless spending and bad ideas. Their new contract with America? Promises they'll never keep. But Joe Biden and the Democrats deliver.
Yeah, I remember.
There
Nick
you have
mentioned
it.
his contract for America, which I think
We used to
was
call it
better.
the contract on
It was
America.
the contract on America, no doubt about that. And he's still out on Fox News.
So, by the way, you're going to see this. This is coming. This is a kind of a to prepare you for what we're going to be seeing from the Republican side on the promises. And as the video says, Joe's doing it already. So
Yeah. So here's another thing I'd like to turn to, Donna. I happen to believe that our democracy is under the greatest threat maybe in our histories. Some would say maybe the secession was the greatest threat, but even the Confederates accepted the results of the election in 1860, that Lincoln was president of the United States. They didn't like it, so they seceded. Even then, and here for the first time, we have a president who was voted out in a fair and free election by an overwhelming vote, not necessarily in the Electoral College, although that was substantial, but in the popular vote, who's telling his people not to accept the results of these votes. And it just really makes me fearful. And I see in our own state, Republicans try to erect more and more barriers to people to vote. I think we've held the line pretty well on that, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that. I guess we're about to go into a position where we may, for the very first time, have something I think is terribly wrong. The idea that we'll have provisional votes and we'll have to wait, several days to get the results of an election after an election day. You want to talk about that?
Sure. That was a Senate Bill 420, that was proposed that would impose new restrictions, new impediments to registering to vote, and then once having registered, people would get a ballot with a special mark on it that would be essentially put aside, so that if the person didn't provide additional proof of their residency after they had already registered to vote at the polls,
Within 7 days?
that ballot, yes, that ballot would then be removed from the count. Well, that creates a number of problems. One, as you said, Bob, it affects the count. In a presidential primary, in the first in the nation presidential primary, where we pride ourselves on getting the results out,
Very important for us to stay in the first place.
thought of us having to wait another week
Yeah.
before we declare official results, what
Not to
happens in a
mention,
really close
at
race?
the presidential primary is probably the biggest, voting day, registration day too. I've worked the polls in a
Yes.
couple presidential
I'm sure
primaries,
that's right.
and those clerks' tables are lined up almost as much as the people coming in to vote.
To
so-
register.
Well, and here's the other issue. We might not see it so much in Manchester, but in a really small town where there are only hundreds of voters, if there's only one ballot, people are going to know whose ballot that is. The anonymity that somebody expects to have going into the voting booth of their ballot is suddenly going to be lost in
That's a
this
good point. I
case.
hadn't thought of that.
And
That's a good
that's really problematic.
Yeah.
We have a very, very, very long and successful, transparent, accountable track record in how we hold elections here in this state. We do have a number of requirements people have to meet in order to register to vote. Yes, we have same-day registration. We have same-day registration because the legislature in the 90s chose not to participate
Not to do the
in
motor
motor
voter.
voter.
We could have done it
which
then.
meant that we would have access for people to register through various state agencies around the state. Most other states complied. New Hampshire asked for an exception. That exception allows people to register on the day of the election. I think it's a great thing. A number of people who, otherwise would not have been able to participate because they're able to register. People that move from, one place to another within the state. They're able to re-register in their new voting location. But the election officials themselves, I have to say this because the criticism keeps coming, and there are folks that still deny the results of the presidential election, as you said, Bob.
Don Bolduc.
New Hampshire runs
That was then.
just excellent elections that are transparent. Once somebody casts their vote, they should have absolutely no fear of their vote being counted and their vote mattering. And they're counted accurately. We have probably one of the most open and transparent recount processes here in the state.
Anybody can attend.
Just this last election, just last week, we had introduced legislation, I was a co-sponsor, that required an audit of a couple polling places where they used a scanner. The results matched up perfectly.
Exactly.
Now, do human beings who've been on their feet for 15 hours, Mike, on a presidential election, occasionally make a mistake? Yep, I can't promise you that somebody
there-
isn't going to transpose
there
it.
are-
There's no malicious intent.
But there's checks and balances, and the boxes are sealed, and the ballots are counted, and the unused ballots are counted,
and a
they're tallied
Democrat
up.
and a Republican is present
Yeah,
for all of that.
those. Every effort is made to be as clean as a whistle. And the people, and people don't understand this. You have to go through training. It's a real thing. This is not, what you might have for training in your office on safety day or something like. This is real training. You must attend.
It's mandatory.
And it's good training too. It's very well put together. And also the people who are doing it, most if not all of them, have already done it before. People do this for years and years and years. Mr. Dutile at Ward 8. I mean, he was there since I was in high school. So these folks know what they're doing. I just want to reinforce what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's no reason to worry about New Hampshire elections.
So when do these changes go into effect? Will they be in effect in November, or is it next year?
Well, they are being challenged in court right now. And I think, the way the legislation was introduced to what ultimately passed, I think, obviously it was narrowed significantly, but it's still going to be a problem and something that I
Yeah.
think people need to worry about.
Yeah, I think it's really troubling.
Is implementation stayed during the litigation?
Mike, I actually don't have
No,
the
I
answer
didn't mean
to
to
that
put you on
off
the spot
I'm
for that.
sorry,
Well,
I
I'm
should have.
just curious,
I,
you know?
I think that would
I've
be up
followed
to the
it,
judge
but I-
when the case is decided whether he feels that that would have to be the case. He'd have
It
to
would
be-
be, and it may have, I honestly, just off the top of my head, don't know the answer, and I don't want to give an
Again,
incorrect
sorry for the
one.
trick question. I wasn't trying to do that.
No, no problem.
So we have that coming up. Where do we stand in protecting the first of the nation primary? There's always a lot of talk about that. Sometimes it's just a lot of hot air. But
Yeah.
we still have our law. I mean,
It is a
no
lot
matter
of,
what the parties decide to do, disqualifying delegates to the convention or whatever they talk about, we still
The
have our
primary's
law.
going to happen.
So how do you feel about, us? I mean, we still have people arriving here interested. Mike Pompeo was here just a couple of days ago, plainly not because he just chose to go to New Hampshire, because we don't have the foliage yet, but he was here for a
We wanted to
reason.
pick some apples, Bob.
Yeah. So how are we doing on that?
I think the earlier statement that you made of, is it hot air? I do think that the press was trying to gin up a story that really isn't there. The Democratic National Committee has a Rules and Bylaws Committee. New Hampshire is very capably represented by Joanne Dowdell, who serves on that committee. There is a process that the party undergoes. It seems that a number of members of the committee have expressed concerns about caucuses in light of some of the issues in Iowa and other states.
Yeah, they have
They had a
meltdown there last time.
But the issue about New Hampshire's primary is something that I think both parties have always held sacred. And I, as a member of the Democratic National Committee, am doing everything I can. We made a presentation on behalf of the state. Both of our U.S. senators came and presented on the importance of the New Hampshire primary. And as you said, Mike, we have a law. We have a law that says New Hampshire shall go first before any other incident. So, you know, the party's going to go through its process. There's going to be a vote taken. I'm confident that the results will be good. But on the off chance there were, a decision to shake things up, New Hampshire is going to still have the first in the nation primary. I have no doubt of it.
Apparently that's so. People do seem to accept that that's going to be very likely.
Well, there's no
It's a
ability to
statute.
change.
I mean, there's nothing that can be done about it. It will take place. The people will go. The ballots will be cast and counted. What happens after that, that's going to be behind closed doors, perhaps.
Yeah, and how the party chooses its delegates is a different
That's their
process,
business.
right?
That's their business.
The primary is an open and participatory primary. People who are undeclared can select ballots as Democrats or Republican. That's going to happen.
Okay. So here's something else that I'm interested in talking with you about, Donna. And by the way, folks, please do feel free to call in and join us. I'm sure the numbers
This
on
is
the
a
screen.
great opportunity.
603-640-3091. We had one great call from Robert. Thank you, Robert. And we'd love to have some more. But I will go on. New Hampshire has not only been targeted because it has the first in the nation primary, it's been targeted by the so-called Free State Project. I don't know how we won that lottery, but I wish we'd come in second.
There was a process. I mean,
tell you.
go ahead. Don't. No one wants to hear from
Well,
me.
there was a process, but this group of people who were starting the Free State Project looked at a number of different states and used different factors to weigh their decision. But Craig Benson, who was governor at the time, threw the doors
Invited him.
open and said, "Welcome, please come into our state."
One of our few one-term governors in recent times.
Yes. And since then, the movement, as we know, has grown, and it's a movement that has some ideas that have started to bubble up and to surface more. We certainly saw the
kind of
results
plays-
in Croydon.
Well,
And
we
in
on the progress
Gunstock?
report have been looking at this. We looked at a book called A Bear. How did that go? Libertarian walks into a
Libertarian
bear.
walks into a bear. I hope you read it, Don. It's great fun. Really a delightful book and really very telling. But in any event,
But then since then, we've had the Croydon incident. We've had the ski area, Gunstock ski area.
Belknap.
Tease that out a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
What
The way
happened
I've
there?
described it is, Democrats and Republicans can debate and have different opinions about how government should work. The Free Staters don't want any government. They just want to dismantle it. And we saw evidence of that in Croydon, where very few people, because there wasn't a lot of controversy, participated
It was
in
a big
town
snowstorm.
meeting.
Big snowstorm.
And all of a sudden, a very, very small, discrete group, led by Free Staters, decided that they were going to decimate the school budget. Now,
And Croydon, I guess, has, I don't know, they got maybe an elementary school, but they don't have a secondary or high school, so they have to send their
they have to
their
tuition
young
their
people
students to
tuition
other
them out to other communities.
communities. And what ended up happening is it sort of put things in chaos, and the community, fortunately, rose up and organized themselves to call for a special meeting and to unanimously restore the budget to what had been proposed so that they could adequately fund education. Now, this, as I said, it wasn't a debate over, should we put 50,000 or 60,000 in this line? Should we have
nothing at all.
It was just slash across
Wipe it
the
out.
board.
Wipe it out.
Now, in Gunstock, another example, Gunstock, an entity owned by the county, but that has a commission running it. Those members were appointed by the House
Has
members
anyone
from
asked
Belknap
why a
County.
county owns a ski area?
Well,
Let's save that for
You know,
another day.
Manchester has a golf course and a
People
ski
ask
area.
whether that's the
and-
right.
Well, it was a CCC project that made that. The New Deal was
Okay,
responsible for
that answers the question. I'm satisfied.
But
I'm sorry
Gunstock
to interrupt.
is successful and is something
beautiful
that
area.
people cherish within the area, and people travel from quite far to go to and to use the facilities
Yeah,
there.
you go to that area and you go up the top, you have one of those glorious views you can have in New Hampshire across Lake Winnipesaukee or the White Mountains. It's absolutely glorious up there.
Yeah, but the members, so the existing commission members were working with management, and all of a sudden, some of the commission members were replaced, and replaced by people who were looking at dismantling Gunstock, privatizing Gunstock, getting rid of Gunstock. And the community was up in arms because there was
management actually
nothing
walked
they
out
could
because-
do. The commission some of the commissioners ended up suing the county delegation over membership issues. Then it reached a point where the commission actually teetered to a majority of members that did not have the best interests of Gunstock at heart. And the entire management team walked out all at once. I mean, there were events scheduled, there were things that were going to be happening there, and it once again created a situation of chaos. And what ended up happening is some of the commission members did ultimately resign. Most of the members, I think just about all, certainly a number of them were targeted even by a pact that the governor established in their primaries on the Republican side. But it just goes to show that there is this group that is infiltrating the Free Staters, infiltrating
And
various parts
they
of
are
government.
not just Republican, even though they may look a little libertarian,
Correct.
look a little bit conservative. They certainly resemble that. But when I was in the State House, I knew Democratic Free Staters. There were not a lot of them, but there were a few that put that sheep's clothing on in an effort to get to the State House, which was the only point to exert that negative power.
Right, and part of what we said at the beginning, our house is so large, they saw it as an opportunity to infiltrate more easily.
That was one of the reasons why New Hampshire was on the short list, and why when Benson opened the door, they came rushing in, because
And our local government
easy
still
to get
has,
elected. 1,000 votes, you can get elected. You don't have to represent a million
But
people.
they got their comeuppance in the election, the primary elections on Tuesday, didn't they? As we pretty well did the same thing to the Free Staters that chose to run as Democrat, because they'll run on either side that they think is most advantageous for them. They have no ideological commitment to blue or red. They just pick the side they think will work out best for them. But I believe that in New Hampshire, and particularly in Manchester, they did not prevail because their true colors were pretty well exposed.
correct. I think they were, identified as Free State candidates, and none of them were successful in the primaries. And they were running
That's
in
good
some
news.
at-large districts, and
Yeah, I think we have to
They
give a
were
little credit
challenged.
here to Steve Marchand, who's been doing a terrific job of, finding out who these folks are and letting people know who they are so that they can have an informed vote about whether they really want to have the Free State philosophy dominate our state house.
They're
and
not going to
therefore
go
our
away,
government.
though. These guys are in for the long game. I mean, they're buying houses. You know what I mean? They're moving 1,000 miles and buying houses. This is a serious, committed organization.
yeah, and they're settling throughout the state. There's no one geographic area where folks that are part of the Free State movement have settled. It's been quite dispersed.
Well, the book we mentioned says that they originally, before they had the Free State Project, they had the Free Municipality
Free Town
Project,
Project,
and
yeah.
they picked Grafton. And that's quite a good
That's
story.
the basis of the book.
Yeah, yeah, and they have bears in Grafton. You just were up there for veto override day. Every one of Governor Sunu's vetoes was sustained, although one took a Senate vote to do it about that issue of pollution from, licensing a landfill pretty close to a lake up in Dalton, I think. And that one didn't get you into. What did you think about the results of the primary election on both sides, but particularly on the Republican side? It struck me as quite stunning that the Republican candidates prevailed in the major races were all the Trumpiest of them. even though Trump didn't endorse any candidates in any of those races, but they were all the more pro-Trump candidates. What do you think the meaning of that is, and where do you think it's going to go?
Well, I think the election results were quite interesting, and I think a lot of them were down to the wire. I think a lot of people went to bed not knowing who the candidates were going to be. Certainly in the U.S. Senate race, I mean, as I was watching the results unfold, I thought that might end up in a recount. That race was so close between
Charlie
Chuck Morse and Don Baldock.
Conceded very early. I was really surprised that he conceded so early.
Well, you know, I did speak to Chuck on veto day on Thursday. I didn't specifically ask him about his concession, but I'm presuming that they had access to numbers and had created sort of a performance model and knew whether they could take it or not. There is a little part of me that would have loved to have seen a statewide recount, because I think it finally would have been the impetus for moving our primary back. We have the latest primary in the country, and our primary is so late. If we had had a recount like that, I actually asked the Secretary of State this question today, they would have had to have 24-hour shifts of people recounting ballots and worked around the clock in order to meet the deadlines
For getting out the
to
ballots.
prepare the ballots for the general election, if that were the case. So there is a good argument to be made.
There
We've
was an
looked at
effort.
June and August.
There was an effort, and it
There
didn't go anywhere because people in New Hampshire are used to voting in September.
Well,
Live free or die.
there were some arguments. There were some arguments made, some valid arguments made by the town clerks, that many of them perform a dual role of running elections and also tax collection. And they thought June would be too difficult because of that work
The tax
all happening at once. Senator Regina Birdsell and I worked on a proposal to do August. We thought that was a fair compromise, talked to secretaries of state in other states, but unfortunately the governor wouldn't accept August as a date, so we're still at September.
Yeah. What did you think of the results, and how do you think the prospects are? The federal races, very important federal races, Hassan, Pappas, Annie Custer, and then the state. We have, I think, a wonderful candidate for governor in Dr. Tom Sherman. I just don't think we could have asked for a better candidate, and yet it looks pretty daunting. What's your thoughts?
Well, it was interesting that the governor didn't have a lot of sway within his own party. The candidates that he had endorsed Mayor Hansel early on in District 2. He had endorsed Chuck Morse, although later, in the closer to the
Which
primary
was a surprise
date.
to Salem guys. I thought that they'd be joined at the hip. I was really surprised.
It clearly wasn't enough, and the governor's endorsement obviously didn't carry enough water with Republican voters. They were separated. I mean, the governor only got 80% of the vote, which for a sitting governor is, should be a little bit concerning. Whereas Senator Hassan did have primary opponents. She got more than 94% of the vote, I believe. So I think it's going to shape up to be some very interesting races. I think what's going to be most interesting, though, I look forward to the debates. I certainly will watch them.
They should be really good.
There are very, very stark contrasts between the candidates on issues like abortion access and even on election results and denying the results of a presidential election.
Well, we have one major candidate, Baldock, who stoutly said the election was stolen. He stood by it, and then 2 days after he was the nominee, he said, "No, I'm not doing that."
Well, he'd done 2 days of research, talking to people in New Hampshire.
Talking to people in
figured
New
it out.
Hampshire.
Well, throughout the campaign,
He's a quick study.
Caroline Leavitt had said that the election was stolen and that Biden didn't win the election. And I believe she was asked on election night, well, if that's the case and that's what you truly believe, how do you know that you actually won tonight? Because it's the same people running the elections.
But she hasn't changed her position on the election, the 2020, as Baldock has.
Not to my knowledge,
Not
no.
to my knowledge either, right? Okay. So here we are. It's because of the lateness of our primary, as you well mentioned. We have, 49 days to the election, I guess. And well, tell us about you're a strong campaigner. You always have been. You're still going door to door and talking to people, and your district's unchanged. So I hope you're feeling pretty good about your prospects. 'Cause
Well, I always run like I'm a vote behind, and I especially appreciate the opportunity to go door to door and talk to voters. I did not do door to door in 2020. I wasn't
I think that was
sure.
I know we
how
didn't do that
voters
because
would-
of health concerns, and the Republicans more or less did it, and I think that was part of the reason we didn't have better results in 2020.
I think it was a huge factor, but
Yeah.
I still don't regret the decision. I think given a lot of the unknowns at the time, it was the right decision, but I do think it impacted. But it's part of the reason why I'm out, in earnest right now, because there are a number of new people that have moved into the wards and the town that I represent, and I enjoy, engaging and mixing it up on the issues, and really hearing from people. As much as I sort of study up and try to prepare myself for what issues voters are going to raise and try to discuss, I'm always amazed at what people have to talk about. There's always something outside of what you think is a chronic issue that sort of elevates.
What are
And
you seeing in your door-to-door? I'm going to go back to voter enthusiasm. Are you seeing people who are, grudgingly listen, take the paper, or are you seeing people who are engaged and who are saying, yes, I am going to vote, put me down, you can count on me
Yeah, I'm
showing
talking to people that are definitely going to vote. They are going to vote. Some are undecided, and that's why I'm there to try to sway them to vote for me. But people are definitely fired up about a lot of issues. Whether it's inflation, whether it's abortion, whether it's access to health care. Education is an issue. Here in Manchester, public safety continues to be an issue. Those are the kinds of things that I'm hearing. But predominantly, I'm hearing about women's rights to access health care and inflation.
Yeah, I think those are the dominant issues, and my God, the Supreme Court really handed something to us as Democrats who want to see our candidates win when they took away for the first time
it's a funny way to look at
right
it.
in almost 50 years of existence in this country. I mean, just stunning. And I'm sorry to say, the Supreme Court, you and I are both lawyers, Don, it's really sad to me to see how low the Supreme Court has fallen in public estimation because of the apparent political bias that they display in their votes. It's just really appalling.
Have well earned every notch downward that they have fallen. They
Yeah.
have well earned it. There are judges on that court that just shouldn't be there. It's
Well, the decision was the first decision to actually pull back
right. That we have
on
expanded
civil rights
over the course of
It's
this
always
country.
been an
Yeah.
expansion of civil rights. It's always been more inclusive,
Yeah.
and
There's more to come,
have
too.
had a further restriction. I think
There's more to come,
That's
too.
really what scares people. The restriction itself is troubling, but the thought of what may be down the road
Yeah.
as some
Yeah.
of these cases work their way through the federal system
Yeah.
is really frightening a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm very alarmed about the attack on the this thing about somebody's woke. I thought.
Well,
woke,
I got to say, our side of the argument has selected some of the worst slogans to get behind. The word is awakened, okay? I'm sorry. The word is awakened. To be awakened is a good thing, and it is
Yeah.
it is less deridable.
woke means to be aware of what's going on.
I understand what the meaning was. We all do, unless we don't want to. And the people who don't want to are using it as a weapon, as a bludgeon to hit us with. The same thing with Antifa. Anti-fascism is a good thing. That organization may not be, but we've got to.
If it exists.
If it exists, you're right. If it even exists, but the branding that the left side of the argument. I'm not going to say the Democratic Party because it isn't. The branding that the left side of the argument has been using has been really weak, and it has handed these opportunities. They're silly. They'd have no substance to them, but yet they're a barrage that we have to take.
Yeah.
I wish we could brand better.
Yeah. So one of the things that's been bothering me a lot, Donna, is I watch what happened in the 2020 election, and the refusal of the loser to accept his defeat is really worried about even having a democracy in this country anymore. it just seems to me that one of our parties has gone so far over the edge that they don't even really support democracy in this country anymore, small d. I mean, I'm really concerned about it. Do you share that concern, and what do you think the best thing to do to make sure that we continue to be a democracy with elections where we can accept the results?
I mean, I don't know that it's the whole party. Certainly a significant segment. I think the fact that there are elected officials who, although I have differences of opinion with on policy, have condoned some of this behavior and have sort of allowed it to fester, I think
Yeah.
is very
It's the leadership
problematic.
that's the issue, right?
Because there are some things happening that are truly, truly ugly and destructive, and they're just not in character with, when I served back in the House, it was in the early 90s. I certainly had debates with Republicans, and as I'm sure you did, Bob, throughout your career in the legislature, but there was always at least a respect with most people that although you disagreed on issues, they weren't bad people, they just had bad ideas, and you'd take the votes and you'd move on. But some of
And
this
could be persuaded
behavior
also.
is
The worthy opponent can be persuaded or can find a middle to reach. That doesn't exist anymore.
and that kind of discourse between is what I think the voters sent us there to do. The voters don't want people to refuse to negotiate, refuse to compromise. The voters want candidates and elected officials to engage and to reach
To find the
consensus and to
solution.
keep moving
That's the
forward.
hard part. Find it.
Right.
Find it. Both of you work and
Right.
find it.
Exactly.
So we're just about at the end here, Donna. This has been terrific. Thank you for
We didn't
being
take our
part of
second break,
show.
I think. We're just
Yeah,
going
we're just
crazy.
rolling along.
So much to say.
There is a lot to say. What do you think about, I think 3 months ago we were worried about another big red wave election like we had in 2010. Boy, I remember that one. That was awful. Tea Party time. And now it looked like that was going to be the case this time, but now it's looking a little more promising, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel a palpable energy amongst voters that have concerns about things that are going on, but that want people that will bring solutions, whether it's to Concord or to Washington. And I do think, as we discussed, the Dodds decision has had a huge impact on the electorate and has really caused a lot of people to view the need to get out and vote for candidates that will support their civil liberties.
Yeah.
And support judges who will as well.
And by
Right.
the way, when you were talking about your accomplishments, which are really very significant, I'm glad you did that. But you have been a stalwart supporter of Planned Parenthood and the opportunity for women to have the health care they need in all facets of their lives for a long time. So I certainly want to congratulate you for your activity on that, and I'm sure it continues.
Well, thanks, Bob. It does, and the issue is really about access and allowing people to make informed choices for themselves. And a lot of that starts with education and with access to birth control.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, we have reached the end of our enjoyable hour once again, Bob.
we have. It's
We've
been
got to
fun
go.
again.
There's more to talk about, but
And,
we've got to go.
Donna, thank you for coming in and joining us.
Thank you both. Appreciate the
And,
opportunity.
we are going to look forward to having you back as the Senate President, I hope, after
Wonderful.
the election.
Thank you.
Here's to
All
that.
right. Take care, folks.
Now, folks, look us up on Instagram.
Yeah,
there might
look-
be something there.
Yeah. We'll see you next week with another edition of the Progress Report, everybody. Thanks to our